Let's talk about something you use every single day, but probably never really think about: your calendar. It turns out the way we chop up our year isn't the only way. In fact, it might not even be the most natural way. So let's get into the pretty amazing story of a forgotten, more rhythmic way to mark the passage of time. I mean, have you ever really stopped to think about it? Why does February get shortchanged with 28 days, but only sometimes? Why does some months get 30 days and others get 31? It all feels a bit random, doesn't it? Well, there's a fascinating and very human reason for all that beautiful chaos.
Okay, so on the one hand, you've got the system we all live by, this jumble of different month lengths. But just imagine an alternative for a second. A year with 13 perfect months, and every single one of them has exactly 28 days. The simplicity is kind of stunning, right?
All right, so let's dive into our first section and uncover the elegant logic behind this 13-month year. Because this wasn't just some quirky idea somebody came up with. It was a system deeply, deeply rooted in the world all around us. It all comes down to the lunar calendar, a system based on something we can all see in the night sky: the moon's cycles. See, a year naturally contains 13 of these lunar cycles, and each one lasts about 28 days. You do the math, that gives you 364 days. And what about the extra day? Well, that was often treated as a special day out of time, a day for renewal and reflection before the next cycle began. It's just a perfect, self-contained system. And this wasn't just a theory, not at all. This was the living, breathing heart of timekeeping for some of the most sophisticated cultures all around the globe. We're talking about the Maya, with their absolutely mind-blowing astronomical precision. We're talking about the Cherokee Nation in North America, the Celtic Druids in Europe, and so many other groups who saw time not as a line, but as a beautiful, natural cycle. And the way they connected to this rhythm was incredible. Take the Cherokee, for example. They literally used a turtle's shell as a living calendar. The 13 big plates on its back, those were the 13 moons of the year. And the 28 smaller plates around the edge, you guessed it, the days. Time wasn't some abstract concept hanging on a wall. It was part of life itself. So, if this system was so natural, so intuitive, what happened? How did we end up with our messy 12-month version? Well, that brings us to our next section. Because the switch wasn't a scientific upgrade. It was a power play. And this quote right here, this tells you everything you need to know. The whole purpose of timekeeping started to shift. For the Romans, the kalends was the first day of the month. You know what happened on that day? Debts were collected. Taxes were paid. Timekeeping suddenly became about managing money and controlling the economy, not about following the rhythms of the moon. You can really point to two powerful men who were the architects of this massive change. First up, in 45 BCE, you have Julius Caesar introducing his new solar-based calendar. And let me tell you, the transition was so chaotic that the year 46 BCE had to be stretched to 445 days long. They literally called it the Year of Confusion. Then, fast forward over 1,600 years, and Pope Gregory XIII comes along and tweaks the system to get all the Christian festival dates to line up, giving us the Gregorian calendar we use today. Now, to get his new math to work, Pope Gregory did something that is just wild. He literally erased 10 days from history. People went to sleep on Thursday, October 4th, 1582, and they woke up the next morning on Friday, October 15th. Can you imagine? 10 days of your life just gone? This wasn't a natural adjustment. This was an order from the top down. But here's the thing. This story is not over. Not by a long shot. These other ways of marking time, these ancient rhythms, are still very much alive and thriving in the modern world. Okay, get ready for this, because it's a mind bender. There is an entire nation, Ethiopia, that never adopted the Gregorian calendar. And because of that, they live 7 to 8 years behind the rest of us. So when it was 2020 for much of the world, it was still 2012 in Ethiopia. And their system is just beautiful. It totally keeps the spirit of those ancient rhythms. It has 12 months, and each one has exactly 30 days. And then, at the end, there's a 13th mini-month called Pagume that has 5 or 6 days to round things out. For them, time is still deeply connected to the seasons, to nature, and to spiritual events. And you can see this parallel timeline in action right here. Their new year, Meskrem 1st, lines up with our September 11th. So when a huge global event happened, like the arrival of COVID-19 in March 2020, it was marked on a completely different date for them, Megabit 4th, in the year 2012. It's a whole different flow of time.
Now let's jump over to India, which does something completely different, but just as fascinating. They basically live by this incredible dual rhythm. They use the Gregorian calendar for government and business, sure, but they use several other ancient calendars for cultural and spiritual life.
So you get this beautifully complex system. Think of it like layers of time, all happening at once. You've got one calendar for major festivals, another one that's the official national calendar, another one to guide Hindu rituals and astrology, and then the Gregorian one for all the civil stuff. It's an amazing approach where different calendars are used for different but equally essential parts of life. But what was the trade-off? Getting the whole world on one standardized system, that didn't come for free. In making that move, we might have lost something really important, our connection to a more cyclical, natural way of being. And this really gets to the heart of it all. It's about two totally different ways of seeing time itself. Cyclical time is all about renewal, seasons, healing, just being. But linear time, that's about progress, deadlines, production, constant doing and achieving. It's a fundamental shift in how we see the world.
And that shift had real, tangible consequences. Rituals that were once timed with a feeling of the seasons became just fixed dates on a grid. Storytelling cycles got disconnected from the phases of the moon and the natural world, and in a lot of cultures, the spiritual roles of women, which were often deeply tied to those lunar cycles, were pushed to the side.
So all of this brings us right back to you and me, here and now. How can we maybe reclaim a little bit of that natural rhythm in our own crazy, fast-paced world? Because the story isn't over. The resistance to this single, rigid timeline is still going on all around us. You see it in indigenous communities who are preserving their 13-moon traditions. You see it in spiritual movements that are reviving them. You even see it in modern academic proposals that argue for the pure logic of having 13 equal months. So the next time you look at the calendar on your wall or on your phone, I want you to see it as more than just a grid of dates. It's a structure for how you experience your life. So the question is, what does your calendar say about your soul? What rhythm are you living by?